everybody doing? I'm gonna try and get this done, give or take a few around 3 o'clock, because I'm still kind of feeling it from yesterday. Yesterday and the day before, I had pretty good days waking up, and I was a little stressed out yesterday, so that hit me, and feeling it a little bit today too. Uh, okay, I didn't really find any good UFO ones. I do want to say though, I did see a couple interviews, and there's no way I can fill a whole stream with them. But I did find a couple interviews where, like, one was yesterday. Well, actually, I think I talked about that one yesterday. Maybe Nan. If not, you're gonna get screwed. I'm not gonna talk about it today. Um, it was Cuomo's podcast with Jeremy Corbell, and that one I thought was pretty good. And then earlier on the Diablo one, I was talking about this one where the tagline on it, the clickbait on it, was that the new James Webb Telescope had detected, it's either 700 and some odd things or 7,000 and some odd things. And then when I watched it, it was like a 15-minute video. Now, I got about halfway through it and I started skimming it, but I did not find anywhere. They gave you a pretty good history of the James Webb's telescope. They really did it, talking about how it works, why it's better than the earlier ones, its features, its strengths, its weaknesses, why it's like 10 times better than sliced bread. They did a pretty good job on that. And but there was nothing in there where they were talking about all these things that James Webb had determined are coming for us, So it was clickbait. It was shit. But various reporting. Hang on. Various reporting was talking about the House really wants to get to the bottom of what David Grush and others, and apparently they were talking to Grush, and they wanted to talk to the witnesses that he had talked to. And there was a lot of stuff when he was there. They told him flat out, they go, well, and he goes, I can't tell you, during an open hearing. He goes, unless we had like a skiff, I could tell you secretly. And there was some stuff he said he would give them as soon as it was over, because he was talking about some stuff that he couldn't give it to them while in public. And like one of them, I think it was that Representative Luna. She wanted to know when she could get it. He goes, oh, I'll be happy to give it to you after this hearing is over. When we're not, when it's private, I can give it to you. You can keep it quiet. And there was some stuff he couldn't even do then. It would have to be one of those things where it's like Vegas. What happens in the skiff stays in the skiff, that kind of thing. And oh, we're waiting. Yeah, my menu won't open up. We're waiting. There we go. I don't know if this is a Minecraft glitch or if it's the Xbox glitch. I really don't know. Oh, hey, just a little real world news. That guy that was in charge of the Wagner Group or whatever, Putin's version of Blackwater, uh, he's listed as a passenger on a plane that got shot down. So, and like I was when I first heard it, my comment was, Well, wonder if they're in denial about the fact that Putin probably. It's like there's all these people that have crossed Putin, and then you find out that you find out that they crossed Putin, and then they fall out of a window or something. And this guy here, they said at the time that he's probably going to want to stay away from. He's probably going to want to stay from any open windows and tall buildings. And I don't know. It's weird. It really is weird. But one, two, three, four. Yeah, he's turned up dead. My thing is, okay, is he really dead, or is he making it look like dead so he can help other people against? Maybe this is his witness protection plan. If you ever saw the movie Eraser with Arnold Schwarzenegger, I suppose they couldn't show up with a birthday cake and a van and a bundle of balloons, so they had to take out a whole fucking plane to take him out. Well, anyways, I saw this Graham Hancock video, and it was actually a pretty good one. And he's talking about I've I've seen some of this before, and I may have talked about it before mentioned. I'm going to try and go into a little more detail. I don't know if it's going to do me any good, but I jotted down some notes, and I'm hoping that that will trigger my memory. It might not, but I'm gonna really try and talk about it. And what he did was he's talking about how the like humans, we have a amnesia, is what he's talking about. There's so much of our past that have forgotten, and he is not alone on this. That one I was watching last week or over the weekend, Matt something or other, I think the guy's name was. I can't blame this on my. It's definitely not any better with what's wrong with me, but I've always been bad at remembering names. That's my cross to bear. And but there's other people like Graham Hancock, this Matt guy, and they talk about how there is history that we are unaware of. Hancock's first one I've ever heard referred to as amnesia. And then if you know a history, and this has nothing to do with the UFOs, but I've heard this say that if we wouldn't have had the Dark Ages, we'd probably be colonizing other planets right now. We lost like 100 years, and you think about it, if we're sitting here in 2020 ish, 100 years, that would mean that where we're at now could have been where we were at, give or take a few years. Maybe we'd even gotten there earlier. We could have got there in the 1920s. So instead of the Great Depression, bread lines, and the downfall of Republican economics, at least somewhat, where would we be now? If we were here in the 20s, that means like around 1860, 1870, we would have been landing on the moon. Let that sink in. But that was the effect of the Dark Ages. We lost a lot of technology, and some say we would have lost more if it wouldn't have been for the church. I don't know if you can say that, because maybe they lied to us. Maybe, because like, how much shit do you hear about where the Vatican is squirreling away all this knowledge in the Vatican? And I'm sure at some point it was a noble effort where they were gathering up all this stuff, and then somewhere they got greedy and they didn't want to hand it back to us. Maybe they were doing that so they could keep people in line and keep molesting kids and all the other bullshit that they were doing. And I don't know. I'm not accusing anybody. I'm just saying I don't know. But when you look, because this was just something the other day, and they were talking that there's another church scandal. It's some big mega church, and I'm not sure it's evangelical. It might be Catholic. But there's another church that's got a fucking massive scandal with children, and it sounds like they may be shutting down because it's something like massive cases of child abuse or sexual abuse. I don't know if it's kids or not, but it's still more sex scandal. And so I don't know. But that's what we got. There's another one. They didn't learn. They're still doing it. Well, anyways, he got talking about, well, one of the things he talked about, and I jotted notes because this was like, and it was an older interview of his, and I don't have YouTube open anymore. I got the news on, so I can't look it up. But it's just basically a Graham Hancock interview. It's an older, and he's got a lot of these like this. But he looked kind of young in it, so I would say it was probably from at least 10 years ago, maybe. He was talking about the book he did, Fingerprints of the Gods, so it was definitely after that. Maybe it's not as old as I think it is. I don't know. But one of the things he got talking about the story of Noah. And this was on Threads where somebody made a comment about religious people. And I don't know if the Bible came into it, but I brought it up. And I just mentioned that, there was so much in the Bible, there's so much in Christianity that they stole from other places. I was talking about the cult-like nature of the Christianity when it was beginning. And I mentioned, the stories of Jesus. Those can be found in older stories. They are not unique to the Bible. They're not even unique to that culture. But, you can go to Egypt, and I think it's Osiris, and I can't remember who the female was, but he was killed. I think it was Osiris. He was killed, and she went and put him back together, and then 3 days later he was reborn. He came back to life. That's the Jesus story. There was another one from that culture, and I cannot remember the guy's name. Might be Mithras or something. It was a name that started with an M when you pronounced it, but he's another one who died. And I think he's either someone who died and came back to life 3 days later, or he was another virgin birth. Jesus was not the first virgin birth, What we got? Nope, no bad. And but that's the reality of it. That's the stuff we got going on. And what he talked about was, but he was talking about like the story of Noah. It's Manu, I think. That's the person in India. Whether you want to call it historical or a character, I don't know. But Manu was from India, and he was basically Noah. It's the same story. Like if you take a lot of these old religions, mythology, whatever you want to call it, you take Greek, Norse, and a lot of these religions, they're real similar. You have that one child, like in Greek, he was half human. In Norse mythology, he was real, or he was full God, but they had a problem with a parent. And they had to prove themselves to come back into their graces. That was Hercules. That was Thor. They all had the goddess of fertility. They all had the warrior goddess. They all had nature. The only exception is like in the Norse mythology, they don't really have a healing god. Like for them, You either were strong enough to survive or you didn't. There isn't a lot of healing in the Norse mythology. And but you take like now the Celtic legends, that's completely different. They're a little different. So, but you take Greek, well, and Romans, they literally just renamed the Greek mythology. But you take like Greek gods, you take the Norse gods. I think India's got something similar. China's got something similar. These may have been the same beings, whether you want to call them aliens or gods or whatever. These are basically might have been the same things that just they fit them into their culture. You know, the names were different. They didn't really care what they were called, or because of the languages being different. Maybe they learned it from them and then put it into their language that way. Like when I took French and Spanish, and I cannot speak. I think I can start a fight in one or two of those languages, but I don't really know how to converse in it. Um, the They didn't have a name for me. My name did not exist, so I had to adopt a name for both languages. I had to because they didn't have my name in there. AFKC wasn't in there, so I had to adopt. I had to adapt, survive, and overcome it. And but he talked about, and then in God, if I got these wrong, at Decatlon or something like that, that's the Greek version of Noah. And he talked about how there was a Maya Noah. He didn't give a name for it. But he said, the Noah story exists in all of them. And this ties into that video I was talking about, I think last week or something. He goes, if you want the origins of the Noah story, you got to go back to Sumeria, the Sumer story of Gilgamesh. And I talked about, I'm pretty sure I talked about that. Maybe not, but I think I talked about it. If not, I apologize. But Gilgamesh dealt with a character, and when the guy said, he goes, it's the least read part of Gilgamesh, but he goes, this is my favorite part of Gilgamesh. Well, the way he was talking, there was a guy in there, and the guy and I think if I did cover this, I gave the name he gave, unless I screwed it up, and he was the Sumerian version of Noah. He said, regardless of what he's called, he embodies the Noah story. That's the way it is. And hey, replanting his life. And so you got that, and it's the same story, but it was written thousands and thousands and thousands of years before Noah. These other stories, and like the Indian ones, apparently the Sumerian one is the oldest, but they were all written like later. It's not like they're telling this story like a week later, like, oh, they just hopped on a jet, landed in the airport, picked up that story, and they're passing it on. And then he talked about Atlantis, and he said, Pluto told the story of Atlantis. It was related to him by passed down through the family from Solon, I think the guy's name was. I might have that wrong, but he was like an ancestor of Pluto's, and he learned it from ancient Egyptians, and it told of a race that had existed like 9,000 years before Solon. And the problem is, if you don't believe it, if you don't find that credible, well, that you have to, and I can get this because I've heard this said before. Hey, the Bible was written by a whole handful of sheep herders who didn't know where the sun went at night. And I don't know if we can honestly say that about them. They might, because of the Dark Ages and other things, they may have known more than we suspect they did. I don't know. That's an assumption I'm not willing to make anymore, but I don't know. And but and I've heard him talk about this before, so you can watch a lot of different interviews with Graham Hancock, and he'll be telling you the same thing. His story doesn't change except for when he discovers more facts, And but he said, Solon had this, Pluto had it and shared it. That's why we have it now. And he said it's just funny that the stories they tell about Atlantis, like how long ago it was when it was created, it actually matches up with historical data. Like, we know that 11,000 years ago, roughly, there was an ice age. And we know that the ice formed, and I think he said the stuff over New York was like 2 miles thick or something like that. But the ice formed, sea level rose. So you had the ice age, you had the flooding. That matches up with stuff in the Bible, that matches up with stuff in other cultures, and it matches up with Pluto's story and Solon's story and the story that Solon learned from the ancient Egyptians. It's just kind of funny that if they made this up, if it wasn't true, that it actually matches up with what we know today. It is what it is. But it's just weird that it does that. And then uh, then he got talking about the maps. He talked about maps being made back 13 the 13th to the 17th century, so like 1200 to 1600. And he showed maps that were made back then. And like the subject of this is him talking about ancient civilizations, but he said, he showed maps that were made back in that time period, and he goes, you wouldn't want to travel with these; they're not very accurate. And if I'm understanding, and I might have them flipped, but you've got latitude and longitude, and he said latitude is easy enough to figure out with the sun and other stuff. You can just accurately measure it. I think it was longitude. Now, I might have them flipped, but there's one of them that you cannot accurately measure unless you've got an accurate time device. And he said that time period, they didn't have them. There should have been no way. And he showed you the maps. These maps are not accurate. He goes, they're very pretty. They're artwork. But he goes, you would not want to be sailing on these because they're not accurate, you know. Anyways, but they're just not accurate. And then the other thing he talked about is back in that time, there are these Portolan maps. I might, I can't spell it for you. I didn't, but Portoland, I think Portolan or Portoland maps. These were ones that they had back in the 13th to 17th century. And what happened was, they had those, and they actually had, some of these maps were made in that time period, but they are way more accurate than anything else they have in that. The other ones that were being created. But these Portland maps, every one of them, the people that were responsible for them admitted that they were copied off of much older maps. And what he speculated, and he gave, and you'd have to find the video and watch it. Maybe near the end of this. Stick around to the end if you're really interested. Stick around to the end or skip to the end. And if I don't forget when I get to the end, I will go look it up on YouTube and tell you the name of the video and what YouTube channel it was, and you can go check it out. I forgot and I closed it out before I thought to do it, and I didn't write it down because if I do something like that, I want it to be accurate so you can actually go get it. And but no, there was a guy who he considered an expert on these Portland maps or whatever they are. If you want to know how to spell it, you can go check out his video too. That'd be another good reason. That'd be another good among many reasons to go watch Graham Hancock and learn what he has to tell you. No joke. And but he thinks that those maps were in the Library of Alexandria. And then when the Library of Alexandria was destroyed, he thinks some of them were taken to Constantinople, and then he thinks that the religious knights, the ones that died on Friday the 13th, I might have this wrong anyways. The Knights Templar, yes. The Knights Templar, he thinks, took them there, uh, maybe to Constantinople, or somebody took them to Constantinople. And the Knights Templar, when that fell, were the ones that picked it up. And that's how these old people in those centuries got them. And they copied them. And this is the thing, the ones that were copied from these older maps that we no longer have, they're gone. They're very accurate. They might not be pretty, they might not be perfect, but he goes, you can travel with these. These would be okay to travel with. They're fairly accurate. And the other thing he said was some of the stuff that is in these maps appears to depict the world as it was, like, I think he said 20 to 50,000 years ago. Well, you have to assume, if he's right, you have to assume that either these maps were created or copied off of source maps that were created back then, or these whoever made these maps that they were using in the 12th or 13th or 14th century, they had some magical way to like remote view what this stuff looked like in the past, because the maps exist. And he showed you other maps that, like I said, they were not very accurate. The longitude, or whichever one it is that isn't, you can't do if you're not advanced. They weren't accurate. And he also talked about, like, because the first map that he talked about was the Paisan charts. They're Italian maps, and these all the ones I'm going to be talking about. They're part of that Portland maps, or Portland maps, or whatever that name. Go check out Graham Norton to get it accurate. But all of these ones are like that. But the first one was these Paisan charts. And I forget the time period he gave on those. I didn't write it down. But those were pretty accurate maps. And then another one was the Ptolemy maps. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, and I kind of spelled it phonetically, so I would maybe pronounce, but I think it was Ptolemy maps. And those were some other maps that were created. And then the last one, now this is the only one of these that I had heard about before today, or at least it's the only one I remember from before today. The Piri Reis map. Now that one there, the guy who created admitted that he created that from 3 older source maps. He took them all and he put them together. Now that one shows Antarctica before ice, and this kind of fits into the Atlantis thing, where this guy drew Antarctica without the ice. And he talked about, you've got like a Russian map of South America, of the South Pole. It does not have uh, Antarctica on it because we hadn't discovered it yet. And the other thing is when they discovered that this one here didn't seem to be right, and then they figured out, they go, this looks like it was drawn without the ice on it. And there were people who said, well, how could they possibly know that? Well, now that we've got, I think it's radar that has shown us what Antarctica looks like, they have found that that map is accurate. The coastline and everything else matches up now that they know what's under the ice. That coastline matches up with what's on this map. Well, you got to ask yourself if, and this is why they know some of these maps date back to stuff that's like 20 to 50,000 years old, because that's how long ago it was since Antarctica didn't have ice on it. That's part of the fucking dilemma. And again, and I just remembered this now, but that guy from Gaia that I was watching the interview he did on, I think the channel's called Julian something or other, and he he made some comment about how old some of this stuff is, and he mentioned that the I think it's one that he said they've only been digging for like a couple of years now, like 5-10 years. It's not like some of the other stuff where they've been digging for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. This one's a relatively new discovery. And he said it's a reputable archaeologist, a guy who does not believe in ancient aliens, does not believe in these old civilizations. And according to him, that guy even put in his report that there was stuff that he was digging up. There was stuff that he was encountering that did not fit with the accepted historical narrative. And he didn't know what to make of it. And he was honest enough to put that in there. He wasn't one saying, "Oh, well, fucking ET was here," but he was saying, "Look, he wasn't trying to explain it, wasn't trying to justify it. He's just saying, hey, there's stuff here that is not making any sense." And so all of this I'm finding fascinating. I really am. But and he mentioned then the other thing, and this goes with what I was talking about with that talking about Edgar Casey. He was talking about this High Brazil. There are maps that have this island off of, God, it's if you and I know I can't tell you how to spell it, but if you phonetically tell Google on your mic or whatever to show a map of High Brazil, it should, I'm hoping, bring it up. And but what happened is there is an island, and I want to say it's near the UK, near Ireland, but it's maybe a couple 100 miles out to sea or something like that. Well, they've actually found it on maps. But this is another thing. Those maps show it, and they've actually spent an effort to find it. Well, what they found is there actually is an island undersea. And it's another one where they figured that thing was not on the surface because it's down deep enough. That thing was not on the surface for probably 20, 30, 40,000 years. When I can't tell you off the top of my head, but it's basically those maps had to be created at a time where we are unaware of the civilizations that are on there. Whether you like it or not, I would say that that is a reasonable. I'm not saying it proves anything, but again, like that one guy was saying about Sherlock Holmes, when you've eliminated all other possibilities, whatever remains, however unlogic or however unbelievable, has to be the truth. Uh, and when you've got people who can factually tell you, well, yeah, it's been this long since anything there would have been, and that's another thing. Like in this whole flood myth, he showed images of it's where the Suez Canal is over there by the Gulf of Arabia or something like that. I think he said it, but it's where the Suez Canal is, the bridge between like Asia and Africa, I think. And he showed you what it looked like, back in the day. And then he showed it to you now. He goes, "There's flooding there. If you go near Greece and Italy, and if you go near North Africa and other places, you can actually find civilizations that were buried. Kind of like what's happening now, where you've got these people that don't believe in global warming, and some of them they're having their sea towns go under, and but they know there's buildings under the water. I don't know if it was Graham Norton or if it was that Matt guy on Julian's podcast, but one of them was talking about how they had talked to fishermen, and they would occasionally get their fishing nets caught on these buildings that are near the surface underwater. Well, when you read these stories of a flood, well, these guys were primitive fucking people who didn't know where the sun went at night, so they had no way of knowing. For them it was their whole world that got buried. And he showed you the two different pictures. He goes, "Yeah, this never used to be an inlet for the ocean. This was a river." And he said it was a pretty fertile area because it was like a little Eden there, because of the water and everything there. And then he showed you now this is what it looks like. It's infertile. It's desert. You can't really survive there. It's not habitable. And he goes, you got these two big waterways that are there. That was the flooding. And then you look at all these coastal towns. Like if we don't get our shit together, we're gonna have those here around Florida, California, New York, the South. I'm in Wisconsin, so our Great Lakes might improve. Our Great Lakes might become a little bigger, but I don't live too close to them. Some of the lakes might get bigger. I don't know. Um, but we should be okay for the most part here in Wisconsin. But there's a lot of these coastal areas. You're going to have like a third to half the state get covered in water. Florida's going to look a lot different. New York's going to look a lot different. California's going to look a lot, and a lot of these southern hellholes where they fuck each other's sisters and shit, they're just not going to look that good. There's going to be some bad things there, and so I don't know. But I found it. I might watch the rest of it later, but I got through a bunch of it. And when I got to the point where I thought that's about all I'm going to remember when I go to do it, and I took some notes, but that to me was pretty. And then the other thing he brought up, I forgot about this till just now. He was talking about another thing that's on those maps, and it isn't there anymore, but it's near Bimini. There's more to the maps around the islands near Bimini. And he said, so there appeared to be something there. And he goes, there was probably a civilization there. Because he said underneath it, we can see the Bimini Road underwater. And again, this goes with that Edgar Casey stuff I was talking about a week or two ago, maybe whenever I did it. I think it was a couple weeks ago, but I don't know. It might be longer, might be less. Um, but he was talking about there was some great repository of knowledge near Bimini. and that it was underwater. Well, maybe someone should look around that Bimini Road and like now this is older, so I remember it a little better. But it was in search of. There was a guy who was scuba diving, and there was like some underwater activity, and something opened up, and he went into it, and it was like a temple-like thing, and it was underwater. And he brought back a crystal. I don't know, it was like a crystal ball or what, but it wasn't metallic. And he found it, and it was in like a little statue or something of hands or whatever, and he took it with him. And then he got to look around for a little bit. Well, then he started hearing the ground quake again, or he could feel it, and he was worried that he'd get stuck down there. So he got out, and he's never been able to, at the time, this was back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, and when that show was on PBS, and he was never able to find it again. But the funny thing was, that thing was not metallic. It did not appear to have anything metallic. But they showed you on the show, if you put like if you put a magnet on like a spring where it could flex, this thing would repel a magnet. It would not attract metal, but it could repel a magnet. It was weird. It was absolutely weird. Well, uh, Nicole Wallace is on, and I generally like her show, and I'm kind of lightheaded. I'm going to kind of putz around on this some more. Hopefully, like you can see, I'm making a little bit of progress. Hopefully, you'll see some more when you get on, but I'm going to go ahead, and as long as I can, I'm going to work on this while I watch her show. Peace out, and I hope everybody has a great day.